Hello YouTube and welcome to this new lore video. Now today we're talking about the other known islands on Nirn. You know, not the continents, but the islands. Before we begin however, I wish to tell you that I actually updated my Patreon ranks. And I'm really looking into expanding the Patreon program with more rewards now that it's getting a bit more successful. So if you're interested, check out my Patreon to see what kind of rewards you can get. And keep updated, because I might even update it when I get more ideas for more rewards. With that behind us, let's immediately kick off with the video. So there's relatively not much things known about the islands, yet we do know quite some interesting things. I'm not going to talk about the islands of Strosmakai and Solstheim, since those were actually major settings in games, but I'm going to talk about the lesser known islands of Nirn that are around of Tamriel. We basically all know about Akavir, the great continent to the east. We know about Yokuda, the great continent to the west that sank into the sea. We all know about Admora, the frozen wasteland to the north, and we all know about Piennone, the jungle to the south. But not many of us know about the three smaller islands to the east, the one larger island to the north, and the large island group to the west, and some minor other islands that are actually quite interesting. So let's first talk about the islands to the east: Esronit, Inslia and Ketnoke. Since, we don't have any canon information on any of their geographics, we will need to use this fan interpretation for sake of the video. We don't know how far these islands lie from Tamriel's shores, all we know that they are somewhere between Tamriel and Akavir. So, for this video we will use this fan interpretation map to see where they can possibly be located. But remember, these locations where they are right now on this map aren't canon. So let's start with Ketnoke and Inslia. Well, we don't know much about them. Literally, we don't really know anything about them. Except that they were conquered by the Emperor Uriel V before his Akavir invasion. Near the end of his conquest of Akavir, a rebellion broke out on these islands, which actually required the Empire to send 2 legions to the islands to quell the rebellion. Thereby, by sending those legions, they established firm Imperial control on the 2 islands, but in the end, sending these legions contributed to the failure of the Akaviri invasion. These islands, together with their 3rd island, remained part of the Empire after the failed invasion of Akavir. But if the Empire still controls them by the 4th era or even the late 3rd era is unknown. I personally speculate that they, basically govern themselves now, and that they probably broke away from the Empire during the Stormcrone interregnum, so when the Septim line ended and the Empire basically crumbled away. I suspect that Titus Mede I did not really try to reconquer them, because, they don't have much use for him since he doesn't have control of Black Marsh and Morrowind. So he would have lots of trouble to even supply the islands and to conquer them. So they probably govern themselves now and have occasional trade with Argonia or Eastern Morrowind. But this is all speculation, of course. It could even be that Morrowind or Argonia now control the islands. Point is, we don't know, unfortunately. Now onto the 3rd island in this little archipelago. On the 3rd island, Esronit, we know a little bit more. We know that prior to its invasion by Uriel V, it was actually ruled by a prince called Prince Bashamon. Whether there was a king of Esronit is unknown. All we know is that at the time of the invasion, the prince had the authority to surrender the kingdom to Uriel V during the invasion of the island. After surrendering the island, Uriel V renamed the capital of Esronit to Black Harbor and used it as the major launching port for the Akaviri invasion. This leads me to believe that Esronit was the largest island with probably the most resources, because, you have to be able to build such a large port and to actually supply the armies. And it probably also has the largest population of the 3. However, it could also just be that, Esronit just had a conveniently placed city. I guess we just don't really know anything on the islands unless Bethesda writes more or lore on them or releases an official map of Nirn in which we can see all the continents and all the islands. I'm just waiting for that moment. So, other than Esronit, there's actually another smaller island to the north that is actually not added into this fan map. It is called Vonora. This is a very small island that has nearly no contact with Tamriel, yet it's very interesting. because the only thing that we know about the island is, well, it has a quite good standard of quality of life, and that it is actually unknown to most of Tamriel's population. The location of the island and even the existence of the island itself is basically a mystery to most. It is in fact an island where the legendary Morak Tong Guild sends its retired assassins to live out their days in comfort. So it's basically a peaceful island filled with murderers. It sounds like a lot of fun. However, it's mentioned multiple times in books, so it isn't just a throwaway detail that they eventually threw in somewhere. It's actually an island that's mentioned multiple times throughout the games. So now let's take a look at the island of Roskria in the north. It's a barren island of which, well, we don't know much. However, we do know that with its barren climate, it actually has a quite formidable defense strategy. We know this because this island was also conquered by Uriel V and actually incorporated into the Empire during his conquest. But it took him 3 years to take over this rather small island with the full might of the Imperial Expeditionary Army. We know, well, nearly nothing about the island except that it was conquered by the Kingdom of Solitude in the late 3rd era. Which is strange because we don't hear anything from the island in Skyrim. When the Kingdom of Solitude was incorporated into the Kingdom of Skyrim, Solitude must have lost control over it in the years following. Or even during the Oblivion Crisis itself, as well. I don't know why they wouldn't mention this territory in Skyrim if it's part of the Kingdom of Skyrim. All I'm saying is that it would be pretty weird if this is still a part of Skyrim, as then there would at least be a mention of the island or a ferry to the island or something. But there's literally no mention of the island in Skyrim, only in previous lore. There's literally nothing. Now, all these islands that I've mentioned in the video up until now are basically all on the east of Tamriel. But to the west of Tamriel, in the Abyssinian Sea and the Eltharic Ocean, are also a lot of smaller islands. We know most of them from this map, from the Elder Scrolls Redguard, and we're not going to talk about all these islands that belong to what used to be Yokuda, for the simple reason that we don't know anything about the individual islands. We're also not going to talk about Thras, as I already did a video on Thras and the Slodes. Bottom line is, we don't know much about any of the islands that we have here. The only ones that we actually know something significant about are the islands of Hurn, Cespar and Sturk. So let's start with Hurn. Hurn is a small island to the west of Tamriel. It's basically the neighbor of the island Cespar, and both had some notable influences in the history of the Redguard. Hurn was actually a refugee for, well, Redguards fleeing from Yokuda to Tamriel in the First Era, and it is said that the original inhabitants of the islands were actually Needs. However, if there's even any truth to this, it doesn't really matter, because they were, according to legend, exterminated by the Redguard warriors from Yokuda. There are actually hints in the games that this island now belongs to Hammerfell, but other than that we don't really know much about the island. Its major role in history it played during the migration from Yokuda to Tamriel. Its neighbor Cespar had a similar role in the Redguard's history. It would also be a stop for fleeing Redguards. In the 3rd era it is said that this island now belonged to Hyrok, and in the 4th era we know that, well, one of Emperor Titus Mede I's great warriors came actually from Cespar, indicating that this island is still populated and it's still even part of the Empire. It's presumably populated by mainly Redguards, because the warrior that belonged to Titus Mede's army was actually a Redguard that came from there. So I think it by now belongs to Hammerfell, but if it still belongs to Hyrok, it would even mean that it's still part of the Empire. And that's actually pretty interesting to think about, if you ask me. Now, finally for this video, we have the island of Sturk. Sturk is a small island off the Gold Coast, dotted with alien ruins and tropical plants. It is even featured in the Elder Scrolls Online, and Sturk has a very significant historical context. Some of the most important events in history had their feature on the island. While it's mostly populated with pirates through the ages, it actually had some very interesting events on the island. Like in the First Era, it was the place where the Ulflag's navy assembled itself for attack. This was the large coalition army that was assembled to fight the Slodes. Another major event on the island was the convention between the 3 leaders of the Alliance War during the events of Elder Scrolls Online. Since this island is only inhabited by pirates mostly, it was considered to be a no man's land, and thus the perfect location for a summit between this kind of enemies. So during the Elder Scrolls Online you actually visit the place and help with the negotiations between the leaders, and eventually it fails. Alright, so I think I covered most of the significant islands now. Trust me, we have way more islands like this island and this island. But the honest thing is that we only know that those islands exist. And other than that, there's simply no lore on them. So sorry, I can't do anything with those islands. I really hope that you liked this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, click the bell icon if you actually want to see my other videos. Because YouTube no longer pushes it to the subscribers. And also in the description is my Patreon right now, which I'm actually busy in revamping. So over the next week there will probably be added some more things. I would just check it out, check out the few tiers that there are. And if you're interested, well, decide grabbing one of the tiers. All of the tiers have rewards by now, and all of them have a little tweak to them. Alright, if you want personal contact with me, there's my Discord and Instagram in the description. And I will see you all in the next lore video, I hope. Bye bye.